When we think about the mafia, we tend to think of men and women only as spectators or tools used by the mafia men. However, there have been a few exceptions, and Maria Licciardi may be the most violent and notorious of them all. When people are asked what they think of Maria Licciardi, they will say she was charismatic, calm, highly intelligent, ruthless, and more importantly, they will say she was the
Capo dei capi,
the boss of bosses in the mafia organization based in Naples. This is the story of Maria Licciardi, the female boss of the Licciardi clan, and the godmother of the Secondigliano Alliance.
Questa è la storia della Camorra con Magnus.
The Camorra's activities have led to high levels of murder in the areas in which it operates, and it is considered to be the oldest and largest criminal organization in Italy, possibly being founded as early as the 16th century. The name originated as a blend between the word
Capo,
meaning boss, and
Morra,
which was a gambling game played on the streets of Naples. When the game was banned, the
Camorristi
earned money from protecting the gamblers from passing policemen. Originally the leaders were elected within the society, but this changed to be more familial. Since the early days, there have been two levels of the Camorra members, low and high. Low was like a street boss, controlling the poor neighborhoods. Today it might be the local drug gang. Then high refers to those who work in politics and corruption, either directly in office, or by winning public contracts, and thus technically speaking, working through legal means. The Camorra is based in Campania, and centered around Naples. Like the
'Ndrangheta
and the
Cosa Nostra,
it is a criminal organization, or secret society that finances itself through various illegal activities. However, the Camorra is differently organized than the Cosa Nostra, who has a strict hierarchy, with one boss controlling all the groups within the Cosa Nostra, and this is of course the mafia group most people know about. Unlike the Cosa Nostra, individual Camorra clans act independently of each other, and are more inclined to fight among themselves. This, however, according to mafia investigators, makes the Camorra more resilient when top leaders are arrested or killed, with new clans and organizations swelling out of the stumps of old ones. As one clan boss told a court, Campania can get worse, because you could cut into a Camorra group, but another 10 could emerge from it. With unemployment rates in the neighborhood of Scampia in Naples, lingering at 70%, there are not many other ways to make a living, other than working in the black market economy, and thus, by default, work for the Camorra. It was this violent world Maria Licciardi was born into in 1951. Maria Licciardi was born and raised in the Neapolitan suburb of Secondigliano, a traditional stronghold of the Licciardi clan, and her entire family belonged to the Camorra. Growing up, Maria Licciardi's role was that of a wife to her husband Antonio Tegami, who also was in the Camorra, and in the mob world the role of the wife was to be loyal, tight-lipped, cook, clean and raise the kids. Maria's father was a well-known guapo, or local boss. After him one of her brothers, Gennaro Licciardi, known as
Ascigna,
the monkey, became a very powerful guapo. He would later become a founding member of the
Alleanza di Secondigliano,
a coalition of powerful Camorra clans which controlled drug trafficking and the extortion rackets in several suburbs of Naples. However, with the crackdown by the Italian government on organized crime during the 80s and 90s, a host of members and bosses was arrested and put behind bars. But also the bloody wars that decimated the clans and families, now made way for changes in women's roles in the Camorra. With many of the men in prison, dead or too young, women started to climb up the ranks and onto the thrones of power of the Camorra. Maria's brother, Gennaro Licciardi, was murdered in prison in 1993, and soon her husband, her two other brothers, Pietro and Vincenzo, was either killed or imprisoned. It was time for Maria to step up and become the leader of the Licciardi clan. However, in order to be accepted by the other bosses and most important of all, the foot soldiers, she had to prove her worthiness. Maria wasted no time, and set up meetings with rival Camorra clans and told them that the fighting over territory and power had to stop. The wars meant that they lost money, and Maria proposed that the clans should carve up the city, and worked together to expand the cigarette smuggling, drug trade and racketeering. The other bosses agreed, and in this way, she brought together a fragile informal coalition of 20 Camorra clans. Maria had proved herself, and became known as the Camorristi, or Godmother of the Licciardi clan, and the Secondigliano Alliance. Under her leadership, the Camorra expanded its business, and became better organized, more secretive, sophisticated and consequently more powerful. She carried a cold and calculating approach in her criminal endeavors, reportedly taking her inspiration from Rosetta Cutolo, sister of Raffaele Cutolo, the boss of the
Nuova Camorra organizzata.
One insider described her as radiating a steely charisma, and according to police sources, she was reputed to be practical, charming, exceptionally intelligent, but also just as ruthless as her male counterparts. In Secondigliano, with no social security benefits provided to the people by the local government, along with an endemic unemployment rate, the clan provided the neighborhood with a principal source of employment, as well as food handouts to the poor people living there. Under her, the Licciardi clan generated a great amount of goodwill among the local populace, who now would protect them against law enforcement. When the government witness, Gaetano Guida, was asked in court about the role of Maria Licciardi and women in the Secondigliano Alliance, he replied,
"They are on the front line in the Secondigliano clan. Women have always had an influential role in many decisions. The Secondigliano women took messages to prisoners, distributed money to members, and organized activities, especially numbers running and extortion rackets. In other words, they constitute the backbone of the organization."
A journalist, Lucia Licciardi, no relation to Maria, was the only journalist to get access to her inner circle, and in an interview, she described Maria's management style as follows.
"She behaves just like the manager of a multinational company. She always looks for a solution that's less likely to attract police attention, and that creates fewer splits within the clan."
Maria Licciardi rose to power and took over as head of the clan, after her two brothers, Pietro and Vincenzo, and her husband were arrested. She was the first female Camorrista to become the boss of the Licciardi clan, and take over as head of the Secondigliano Alliance. She introduced many revolutionary changes to the clan. Perhaps the most important was the involvement in the prostitution trade. Prior to this, the Camorra had a code of conduct that forbade them from making money from prostitution. However, under Maria, this code was overturned. The Camorra would buy the girls from the Albanian mafia for $2,000. Many of them came on the promise of legitimate work, in order to escape the poverty of their own country, but once they arrived, they were enslaved and forced into prostitution by the Camorra. Some of these girls were underage, and they were usually put on drugs, so they wouldn't become an informant or run away. In the late 90s, Maria Licciardi tried to control the possible impact of the testimonies of a pentiti, turned government witness, Constantino Saro. Regretting his decision, he wanted to strike a deal with Maria, and ask for money in return for retracting statements he made on the clan's activities. The Italian police discovered that a few days after his escape from his protected location, Saro met Licciardi. The Secondigliano Alliance discussed it, and was divided over this issue. Some wanted to pay him, others wanted to pay him, and then murder both him and his family. Which one they ended up choosing is unknown, but in January 1998, Maria Licciardi was stopped in a car with her sister, Assunta, and her sister-in-law with around 300 million lire in cash. The prosecutors believed that this was Saro's payment for him to retract his statements. Nevertheless, Maria refused to disclose as to what the money was for, and immediately, after lawyers secured her release, she faded into the shadows again. Other than this, Maria Licciardi's reign had been relatively quiet, everything ran without problems. This was until disagreements over a shipment of pure, unrefined heroin erupted. In the spring of 1999, a large consignment of heroin arrived from Turkey. The heroin, Maria realized, was so pure that it would kill many of the users, creating extra attention from the public, as well as law enforcement. She ordered it not to be sold. Unhappy with her decision, one of the clans, the Lo Russo clan, who had always felt like a secondary clan under her leadership, decided to ignore the order and started selling it on the streets. And just like Maria had predicted, drug addicts started dying like flies on the streets, 11 of whom died in April 1999 alone. This caused great public outrage and resulted in massive police crackdowns on the Camorra clans. Many Camorristi were arrested and subsequently imprisoned, and the alliance that she headed quickly fell apart. This war was what made these tower blocks sear into the popular imagination, and became the symbol of the Camorra's reign, and the poverty and degradation the Secondigliano district had suffered. It was one of the poorest, and now, the most violent district in the whole of Italy. The feud exploded between the clans in the Secondigliano Alliance, when two of the clans attacked Maria's men, killing 4 of her clan members. The Godmother went to all-out war, in what has been dubbed the Scampia feud. The war was a power struggle between clans loyal to the Secondigliano Alliance and the so-called secessionists, a breakaway faction in the northern suburbs of Naples. The clans fought over turf, taking over other clans' businesses and of course power. But it was also a war that would destroy their lucrative business. Maria mobilized her foot soldiers for an all-out counterattack against the secessionists. Their fight for control of the drug trade raged for almost a year, and at its peak, it saw more than a murder per day, and more syringes per square mile in northern Naples, than in all of Italy combined. But this war would also make law enforcement focus their attention on the Secondigliano district, and start to hunt the leaders of the clans. The deadly gang wars resulted in nearly 120 deaths in Naples and the surrounding region, and had its climax when a 22-year-old woman, Gelsomina Verde, was abducted and brutally tortured. This was probably in an effort to get her to disclose the whereabouts of her former boyfriend, Gennaro Noturno, a secessionist clan member. The two had broken up weeks prior to her abduction, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts. She was shot 3 times in the neck, and her body was put in a car that was set on fire. Her brutal death caused widespread public revulsion, and led to a major crackdown by the authorities. 2 days later, Home Secretary Giuseppe Pisanu dispatched 325 extra police to a city that already had a higher ratio of police to people than any other in Italy. On an evening in December, an operation involving 1,500 police netted 52 suspected gangsters, including some of the top bosses of the Camorra. However, this only toned the conflict a little bit down. There would be murders connected to this dispute for many years to follow. Now Maria was in serious trouble, being pressured, not only from her rivals, but also law enforcement. She even made the list of the 30 most wanted criminals in Italy. Thanks to a sophisticated network of protection, set up by her clan, she never left the Secondigliano district, and avoided capture for 2 years. Even though in hiding, she continued as the undisputed boss of the Licciardi clan and ordered several murders of rival mobsters, including members of the Giuliano clan, which was headed by another female Camorra boss, Erminia Giuliano. However, when the senior prosecutor, Luigi Bobbio, began making successful prosecutions against her clan, Maria felt that he was getting closer. In response to his undivided attention towards her, she bombed Bobbio's office building, as a warning. It didn't help her. On the contrary, Bobbio was put under police protection and continued his prosecutions against the clan undeterred. 70 of her men were arrested, but all maintained a code of silence and took their prison term instead of uttering a single incriminating word about their godmother, or anyone else. The police made many fruitless efforts to catch Maria. In April 2000, the Carabinieri arrested 13 Camorra bosses who were holding a summit around a table in a rural farmhouse. However, the godmother was not among them. Maria Licciardi seemed to be untouchable. On June 9, 2001, several hundred heavily armed officers, backed by helicopter spotters, launched an intensive search operation in and around Secondigliano. Acting on a tip-off, they stormed a building that she had been known to use as a hideout. Maria Licciardi was nowhere to be found, but police discovered that inside an attic, guarded by surveillance cameras, she had installed marble floors, a grand piano and a jacuzzi. Her repeated successes in evading capture by the police inspired local journalists to dub her the Scarlet Pimpernel of Italy. On June 14, 2001, Maria Licciardi was arrested by the police. She did not resist arrest, and was ultimately sentenced to prison. After her arrest, her brother Vincenzo Licciardi acted as the head of the clan on her behalf, because although in prison, she still commanded the clan. In prison, she was the undisputed boss and ruled it, just as she ruled her clan, something that made her enemies also on the inside. She would handle this the same way as she did on the outside. In 2009, Maria was released from prison after almost 8 years behind bars. She now went under the radar for 10 years, and very little is known about her during this time, until 2019, when she managed to escape from a huge anti-Camorra operation against the Secondigliano Alliance, becoming a fugitive once again. She managed to hide from the police for 2 years, until she was arrested, this time at Rome Ciampino Airport in August 2021, when attempting to travel to Spain. The Carabinieri police officers said that Maria Licciardi didn't bat an eyelash as they carried out the arrest of her. She is again accused of mafia-type association, extortion and receiving stolen money, and is at the time of the making of this presentation, awaiting trial. This is most likely the end for Maria Licciardi. At over 70 years old, she will most likely spend the rest of her life in jail, and the younger generation of Camorras have already taken over. Maria Licciardi is undoubtedly one of the most successful and brutal mob bosses in the Camorra Mafia's history. And it was her willingness to go to such lengths, and use so brutal methods, that made her as successful as she was. On Maria Licciardi, Luigi Bobbio stated that,
"The moment a woman takes charge of the organization, paradoxically, we witness a lowering of the emotional level, and a better performance of the group's activities."
Although still uncommon in Sicily and unheard of in the United States, female mafia bosses in Italy are on the rise. Statistics show that in 1990, one woman was indicted for mafia connections, but in 1895 there were 89 such indictments of women. However, the emergence of women as bosses is far more noticeable in Naples than Sicily. The police say it is partly a cultural thing. Family ties are very tight here, and women have always had a far more dominant role in the family here than in Sicily, said Giuseppe Dono, a spokesman for the police department of Naples. Before continuing, they say that behind every great man there is a strong woman, and that is true in crime families as well, and when they are in the position of boss, women have proven to be just as ferocious and ruthless as their male counterparts, if not even more.
I hope you found this presentation interesting. And if you did, please smash the like and subscribe buttons as if you were a Viking berserker. I cover a lot of historical topics here on my channel. So check out my other videos to see if there are others you find interesting. And I hope to see you in the next one.